I think you're just going to love this topic. So today we're going to be covering, I think, one of the most exciting lives I've gotten to prepare for. It is one of those things that you might not think about very often when you are getting ready to make products or create a menu or innovate, which at Build a Better Bakery for the month of June, we're going to be focusing on innovation inspiration. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a deep look of the anatomy of a product. It's going to be real fun. So I do want to let you know that you should probably grab a pen and a notebook or something on your phone to take some notes, because I'm going to be listing off some aspects that I think you're probably going to want to look at later when you're creating a product. Let me make sure we're good. Okay, cool. There's Kat. Okay, great. So I can see products. I can see comments for our live today in the group. So if you have anything you want to say, any thoughts, any kind of moments of inspiration that you get during this, let me know. If we've never met before, I'm Melissa Fryer. I am the founder and the main mentor at Build a Better Bakery. So if you're just interested in finding some more joy and less stress and overwhelm as you're starting or growing your own baking business, then we should hang out more. I'm here every Thursday at #ThursdayFave session right here in the group, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, usually every week, or I put up a value post if I can't be here with you live. So being in here, at least on Thursdays at 9 a.m. is a good opportunity for you to grow as a business owner, or just get some information going through your head about how you can make your business better. Go ahead and throw up your #replay if you're viewing on the replay so that I know that you've seen it. I know that we all often have product development on our minds when we're making products pretty much daily. Baking away, we're kind of, at least for me, I'm kind of always thinking, how can I make this a little better? Like, how could I change this? How could I make a new variation of this? It's just my favorite part of baking. So if that's not for you, then, I think you'll still find value in this video, but that's, I think, why this was so exciting for me to put together for you. So let's hop into June, because it's June 1st, by breaking down a product piece by piece, aspect by aspect. Again, get that notebook and pen if you want to not have to rewatch the whole video, just write down the main topics that we're going to cover. And when you think about it, a cupcake, as an example, it's never just a cupcake, right? There's lots of things happening in that cupcake from start to finish that we're going to cover today. And I think once you see the main elements of a product laid out flat, you're going to more effectively consider what makes a successful product, maybe where you can innovate or change things in what you're doing to make what you're doing even better. And I think harnessing the style of breaking down a product in this way is going to make it more natural for you to create better products as you move forward in your business. And it's just going to save you time and money, because you could use this information for market research. Your future product development is going to go a lot faster with more success. All right, throw up your #live if you're here live, and I'm seeing a couple already. Kat and Dimitri are here, so good to see you. If you want to stay in the know about these lives happening, like I said, every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time right now is when I'm going live here in the group. You can check the events usually a couple days before I post what the topic is. You can mark yourself as going to get a reminder from Facebook if you actually physically mark yourself on the event. You can also send me a friend request to Melissa Fryer on the Facebook platform. You will automatically get actual invites on the platform. The group is too big to do for everyone, unfortunately, so we have to be friends on the platform for that to work. Or you can hang out on the email list. It's a free update email list where I send out replays of these videos and other things we have going on. Those are usually going to be a little later though, so you won't see things that are happening that day or that week. It's usually a week or so afterwards I send out replays. So it depends on how you want to watch the content. And we're on YouTube, and I put most of them on YouTube, so definitely head over there. Okay, jumping in, breaking down a product into accessible, clear points of interest so you can get in there and innovate or find inspiration on any of these points. We're going to start with item components, which is kind of where a lot of people stop. They're going to seem really familiar when we go over those. Then we're going to move into aspects of experience a client will have with the product. And I think those are actually, yes, the item components are highly important, but the experience a client's going to have with your product is just going to push them above and beyond anything else that you've done, or really a lot of products in your area from other people who aren't thinking about this. And we're going to use a cupcake as an example, since I mentioned that earlier. Okay, so let's jump into the actual item components. First, edible cake and icing materials, right? Just the standard stuff that you're mixing together to put into the batter or put into the icing. Seems pretty direct. But when we talk about the materials inside the batter and the icings, we can break those down even further, or think about the actual way that we're getting those materials or how they're working. So can you upgrade the products? Like, can you get a better grade of product? Can you change the supplier to get either different products or lower cost products or better products? Can you create variations of that product to meet dietary needs? So working on variations and recipes. I know a lot of us do that to create maybe dairy-free or gluten-free or paleo versions of something that we make with, regular eggs, milk, and flour. Can we create dietary variations? We want to keep an eye out for the next big thing when we're trying to innovate materials and recipes. So you don't have to follow every trend, but if you see a trend that you think would work for your niche, work for your community, and it's something fun that you want to try, keep an eye on those things and jump in when it feels right for you. Can you buy a product that you use often in bulk? Can you find a supplier that offers bulk buying? Can you switch to a more environmentally friendly option of certain products or supplies? Can you create variations in the recipe to appeal to new clients, either via dietary needs or maybe, how ube is really popular right now, the purple yam used in lots of different cookies and icings and cakes. That's a recipe variation, right? That you could start working in popular flavors. Okay, moving on to 2, toppings and extras. So again, pretty simple, staying on trends. If you see them, if certain trends work for you that you like, you can hop onto those. But I want you to keep an eye on the costs that you're accumulating with certain toppings and extras that you're adding to your products. Right now, we're just talking about a cupcake, right? Because we know sprinkles can be very expensive if you're buying high-end sprinkles. So we need to keep an eye on the costs and also the actual taste of the toppings. I feel like people put things on like cupcakes and cookies that don't actually taste good, but they look a certain way. And we have to be mindful that people aren't necessarily going to enjoy eating that. So we need to kind of find a good balance between those. So what are simple, accessible toppings that you can add for that extra pop to your product? Something that you can make yourself or something that you can find locally, hopefully, so you don't run out, if you have an order or something or filling your case. Can you create a homemade topping similar to something like strawberry jam? Can you make a strawberry quick jam that will add that extra flavor boost that store-bought just lacks? If you're buying a topping, like there's a lot of like donut filling toppings that bakers use, strawberry, lemon, blueberry, they're low cost. I understand why they're buying them, and most of them are pretty good quality. But can you make it and add that extra pop of flavor and homemade goodness, and would that work for you, right? So how can you innovate in something special without breaking the bank or spending too much time? And then number 3 for our actual item components is the product contact packaging. Okay, so at this moment, you can just imagine a cupcake sitting in front of you. We've talked about the icing, we've talked about the batter, any kind of topping, and then now we're talking about what's actually touching the cupcake, which is in this case, a liner. Are they sturdy? Do they hold in grease or do they let grease seep out? If you want to test that, bake a cupcake, set it on a napkin and see how much grease the napkin soaks up from the bottom of the cupcake, okay? When it's sitting in the liner. Do they need to be a different shape or size? Maybe you're baking mini cupcakes and it's just not working for you. Maybe your cupcakes are too big and you can't find any packaging. Do you need to kind of shift how that's working? I personally moved to only dark brown liners. They're a sturdy dark brown tulip liner. It's like the square piece that's folded up to look kind of like a tulip. It's just easier for me. They don't seep out grease. They don't collapse, but they're kind of large and they don't always fit into every container. And that's something else that we have to find a balance between helping our actual product contact packaging work inside of the outer packaging that we're using. For me, the tulip shape holds in any extra batter to avoid batter overspill, which also keeps my pans cleaner, and it just avoids waste and extra time of me trying to deal with, anything that happened on the edge of the cupcake that needs to be cleaned up. So that's kind of why I personally moved. But that was an innovation that I did years ago. I used to not use tulip liners. I don't really remember them being super popular then either, like 10 years ago. But when I moved to them, it kind of just made things easier for me for the most part. So an example of how you can innovate on the product contact packaging if you're having any issues with that. Okay. Yes. So Kat's doing all kinds of things. She is making her own toppings, which I love that. A lot of times I do, sometimes I don't, depending on what that's like. Nutella. I'll use Nutella sometimes. I'm not going to make my own Nutella. I'm sure if I did though, it would taste better. But certain things I just buy because they're name brand and everyone knows what they are. But I totally get it. I love to make my own toppings too. All right. So now we're going to move on to this other section of deep diving into the anatomy of what's going on with the product. And you can apply this to any product. So we're talking about a cupcake, but this can be anything. So we're going to move into the aspects of how a client experiences the product and break those down for you. Number one, I'm going to start with packaging because that's the outside of it, right? We talked about contact packaging because that's kind of the item, but right now we're talking about outer packaging. There's lots of variation to this. You can do a number of different things depending on how you want to present your product. It's often one of the first things a client sees. So even though they're not touching the product or smelling the product, they are clocking what's the type of packaging it's in and how is it, what's the grade, right? Like how protective is it? How flimsy is it? How cheap does it look, et cetera. And because it's the first thing they see and come in contact with, I have to say it needs to be somewhat quality. It doesn't have to be $1 million a piece. It doesn't have to be that crazy expensive packaging that some people use, but it can't be the cheapest, like flimsiest thing that's on the market. I see many types of packaging, like for instance, a cupcake. It can be in a clamshell. Some people even use a plastic cup and put the plastic cup in, the cupcake in the cup, and then they take a bag and they put it around the cup and they tie it with a bow. And some people put, 4 or 6 or 12 count plastic clamshells, or they have a paper box that has cutouts that you put them all in there. The list goes on, right? There's lots of ways, or there's a long rectangle one that's clear and it has the cupcake sitting in it. Lots of ways to sell cupcakes. So you kind of got to look at what's available locally, what's in your price range. Some of them are so expensive, it doesn't make sense to me. I just personally am not going to spend that much on packaging, but it depends on where you live and what, are your products gift level? Are they more grab and go? What time of year is it? You could spend more on packaging and charge more over holidays or gift seasons. That could be an option too. So when we're thinking about what we're buying, I feel like packaging is kind of like duct tape. You just get what you pay for. It's just, we got to spend a little money to make sure our products are protected. And when a client picks it up, they feel confident that it's not going to get smashed or break in their hands. If you're going to spend a lot of money on packaging, it might be worthwhile to look into getting your logo printed onto the packaging. There are services that do this. So it just looks really professional and it raises the inherent value of your product. So moving away from stickers into like an actual printed box, that could be your up leveling of your packaging. We want to keep it clean. So you don't want greasy fingerprints. We don't want any scuffing. We want to keep the packaging clean. We want to make sure just really everything inside's not getting smashed. That's kind of the point of it, right? So we want to make sure it's not too small. We want to make sure that the product, if it is greasy, which a lot of big products are, that the product is separated from any paper packaging by wax paper or something similar so that you're not getting grease spots on the outside of the packaging. Stackable packaging is best. It's just easier to move and store and also, have out for purchase. A nice bright sticker or a stamp can do a lot of work too. So if you have generic packaging, which is totally fine, just getting a nice sticker design or a nice stamp created to where you can stamp on your boxes, that's going to go a long way. Many bakers and many businesses do it that way. So just getting that in line too. So each piece of packaging that goes out does have your logo on it. And we just want to keep it consistent. So try to find a supplier that you like. Try to find a business that you continue to patron, and just kind of stick with them unless you see something catching your eye somewhere else. It will keep the look of your product consistent as well, which raises the trust level of when people see your stuff, they know, if you have bright yellow boxes and nobody else does, they don't even need to see your logo to know it's yours. They just know, hey, if the bright yellow box is there, I know Melissa baked for this event. So it creates, brand continuous memorable experiences with your brand. I don't know, there's probably a word for that. All right, number 2, we're going to talk about the name of the product. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty. I have a blog post about this. I have a video about this. So if you're trying to name your business, it kind of goes the same with naming a product. And I feel like it's often not considered in the product aspect when we're breaking it down. So that's why I'm bringing it up today, because I want you to think about the name and how it's affecting the experience or the feelings of a client as they're going to purchase the product. As an example, I personally know what dirt pudding is because I'm from the Midwest, and that was like a kid's dessert that was often served at parties and schools. But if you're not from the Midwest and you don't know what dirt pudding is, it might be kind of a turnoff. You might not necessarily even want to try the product because it's called dirt pudding. So look around who you're selling to, what they're interested in, what's their threshold for words like that in a name, and consider that as you're naming things. The actual words you're using are going to be very important. So if you're using the word messy or dirty, right? Like these words aren't necessarily, you're not thinking yummy food. It's like, ew, I don't want something messy. Ew, I don't want something dirty. In some businesses, in some areas, that's perfectly fine, but we need to kind of feel out who we're selling to and decide if that makes sense or not. Can they go over the threshold of a word that might make some people not want to eat something to purchase because either they know what it is or that's kind of the vibe that your business has? That's something different. But I do want you to think about using words that have negative connotations as you're naming a product, or problematic connotations, right? So that's another thing. Whole other topic. Okay. Number 3, let's talk about presentation. Clients buy with their eyes first. So we talked about the packaging. That's number 1. It can be simple and clean, and that is fine as long as it's, good quality and it makes sure that the product is protected, it's airtight if it needs to be, all that kind of stuff. When they open the product or when they look through a kind of window or a clear space, they're going to look at the presentation. So I'm not saying a product needs to be perfect, okay? None of us are. You are not a machine. I don't want you to be a machine. That's left for commercial stuff. We're artisans. So things are going to have a little spice to them. That is perfectly fine. But it needs to look like that you understand and have mastered your materials. So to me, these are 2 different things. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to look like you know what you're doing. And that comes with practice and usually working with a mentor or a teacher to get some tips, and then practicing, taking some courses, whatever it is you're working on, just getting the how-to steps into your brain and then working on it until you can do it yourself. So does a cupcake have to have a picture perfect swirl every time it goes into a box? Absolutely not. But if your icing is liquidy, if it won't hold its shape and it's kind of floppy, if it's breaking, if the butter is breaking from the fats, if you can't pipe a swirl all the way around without stopping on most of them, then that's just showing me that you need to refine your icing recipe and practice piping. So it doesn't mean it tastes bad. It just means I can tell that you haven't mastered that yet. And again, doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to show that you understand what you're doing. And it usually comes down to, like I said, getting a mentor and then practicing a bunch. I've seen it as a pretty common trend that many bakers who have yummy recipes, they simply aren't practicing or mastering their materials enough, and that's why their sales are low. So it isn't that you're not a proficient baker, it's that when the presentation comes to, you just need to get some more practice in there so that they look more presentable, because people buy with their eyes first, right? They're not even eating it yet. They need to look and think that it's yummy before they'll actually give you the money to try it. Okay. I'm reading some comments. Hi, Tiana. Okay, good. All right, so Kat's just telling us what she's doing at home. how she's making sure presentation and packaging is working for her. All right, number 4, let's talk about smell. So this is the first thing people tend to do when they open a product, is to take a whiff. Even if it's accidental, usually they're going to open it and just give a little smell before they actually go in and take a big bite, unless they're super hungry and they're not, thinking. But usually that's, the first thing that hits you. It's just human nature. So give your products a smell when you make them and see if they're putting off a scent that you like. Maybe it's a cupcake, a certain kind of cupcake, and it just doesn't smell like as strong as you wanted. Many extracts and zests and other very oil scent, products can be added to pump up a smell, especially with cupcakes, because we have the icing that can hold a smell, or even the cake itself. As an example, if I had a lemon cupcake and I wanted the lemon smell to be really bright and front facing, right? Like right when you open the package, boom, lemon. I would place actual lemon zest, which is going to be the closest to the smell that I want, on the top of the cupcake or somewhere in the packaging. So the smell is part of the experience when they're opening the package. You see a lot of this with those like smoked bourbon drinks, and they're bringing smell because, your nose and your mouth are connected in that way, your tongue and your nose. So we got to have smell be definitely something that we're thinking about. Number 5 is bake level. So this is how under or over baked or perfectly baked your product is. Many of us would prefer perfect bake for most items, but it's not the same for every item. And that's why we have to really think about what we're looking for in this particular item. As an example, I prefer slightly underbaked cookies, but a medium bake for something like a scone, and then a higher bake for something like a sourdough. So you can think of it like cookie has kind of a white bottom, a scone has like a light brown bottom, and then a sourdough is like almost dark brown. So you're going to need to run some taste testing to get feedback. If you're creating a new product or you have a product that you think the bake level could be a little different, try to get some feedback on what people tend to like more. Run a few tests. And definitely avoid burning products at all costs. If you burn a product, I would suggest not selling that, because that will, in my experience, that has turned even me as a consumer. I've tried buying products from people, and almost every time I get something, I feel like it's overbaked and it's kind of burnt, and I can't even barely eat it, right? So definitely I suggest that's kind of the try not to do that. So we got to figure out, what's the good baseline for each product that you're making. Number 6 is texture, which is going to lead into number 7. So 6 is texture. This is the crumb of the cake or the insides of the product. Is it dense? Sometimes it's dense due to overmixing, underbaking, a leavening issue. Does it have enough air bubbles? Are the bubbles the same size? Do we have really big bubbles and little tiny bubbles? What's going on with, what's going on the inside of the product? What does it look like? Does it cut cleanly? Does it have the right squish level? Check to see if you can adjust your mixing, your leavening agents, maybe test and make sure they're actually working to get a better texture for your product if you feel like that's something that you want to innovate. Number 7 is mouthfeel. So we're moving from texture leads right into mouthfeel, because you're kind of seeing it and then you're going to take that first bite. Mouthfeel is the concept of how products feel as you bite into it and as it moves around in your mouth. Is it creamy? Is it crumbly? Is it dry? Is it sticky, right? There's all these feelings that you might get as you're chewing on a product. If it's hard to chew, you need to notice that, because that's going to be a problem for people who are eating it normally. Do you get too much, as within a cupcake? Are you getting too much icing with each bite? That's pretty common. So kind of figure out, do I need to, fall back on the icing? Do I need to bake a bigger cupcake with the same amount of icing, etc.? Does it need to be served different sizes so it's easier to eat? Do you need to change up the bake level, right? Maybe the bake level is affecting the mouthfeel. Do we need to change that? Or the materials that are actually going into it, can we change those to make the mouthfeel better? So if you're using a flour that's lightly ground, it has a lot of granules in it, maybe that's giving a kind of a strange mouthfeel. Maybe you should go for a finer flour, right? This isn't a huge difference, but going from all-purpose to cake flour. Cake flour is a little more finely ground. So is that something that you could change up? Or maybe you could add more oil, or have less icing on the cupcake, right? There's lots of ways that you can change that mouthfeel. If you perform market research, as you're asking people and doing taste testing, mouthfeel is going to be very important. You need to ask about this because they're going to tell you what they're experiencing as they're eating it. And I feel like this is the point where a client starts to decide for good if the product is good or bad. So they're starting to create, like, do I like this or not? This is where they're starting to answer their own question. You must nail the mouthfeel. People will be turned off if the mouthfeel is bad. Even if the flavor is good, if they don't enjoy eating it, then it's not going to work out. So you got to hit that one. Number 8 is balance and profile. One of my most favorite subjects ever. And I think it's the best session stored in the Elite Mentorship Vault, in my opinion. So if you're in the Elites, go watch that one if you haven't already. I think it's got really good information. It's very eye-opening. Just as mouthfeel is when the client decides if they think they like your product, the balance is where the decision, I think, is solidified. So it goes pretty fast. They first bite into it, they move it around their mouth, they swallow it, and then they sit with the feeling that's left in their mouth. The balance is where that decision is solidified because they are deciding if they want to take the next bite, right? So they have to decide, do I even want to eat any more of this, or am I going to, devour this in 3 seconds because it's so good? An example would be, have you ever eaten a cupcake that was soft and fresh and it had this great mouth feel, but it was so sweet it hurt your mouth to eat it, and then you forgot about it moments later because there's nothing special about that cupcake at all? That's the experience that I think most cupcakes bring, especially all these commercial cupcakes that people are buying from like the Walmart and all these places. They taste exactly the same. It's cake mix. We all know the flavor of cake mix. It has that little like sour bitter back end. The icing has probably no butter in it. It's very light. It's very fluffy, but there's really nothing to write home about, right? It's just so boring. So likely you're going to forget about that pretty much right away. In contrast, can you remember a time when you ate a cupcake that changed your life, that you thought, it's so good. Like I love eating it. It tastes really good. Every bite's exciting. If you've never had a cupcake like that, I'm sorry. I hope that happens for you someday. It can be life-changing. And likely, if a cupcake has a great profile, as in every flavor is exciting and it feels good and it tastes good, it was probably balanced for you. Balancing is usually done by counteracting strong flavors to create a balance on your taste buds as you're eating. And it's usually sugar that we have to balance with cupcakes because of the icings that we're using. And of course, cake usually has some sugar in it. So for me, I often balance that out by creating cake recipes that have less sugar so that the icing can come in and create the cap of sweetness. I also use salt or citrus to balance out any high sugar content products like icings. That's usually where I'm coming in and using those 2 products to do that. Profile, so that's balancing, but profile is kind of like all the little bits that all the flavors that you're putting together, the main flavors, to create an exciting bouncing around of different types of flavors. So you're not trying to like shush the sugar, you're kind of adding extra stuff in so that it's more memorable of a flavor. And it's pretty artistic. So it's something you can have fun with. And there are some baseline examples of profile flavors that go together. In that training I was talking about in the Elites, we talk about a huge list of those. So when you start adding flavors together, think about how any of those really popular ones that you see, you can start there. An example is chocolate and coffee, right? They're profile best friends. Chocolate makes coffee taste better and coffee makes chocolate taste better. So anything that you can kind of get put together that works, and you might discover something brand new that not a lot of people do yet, definitely jump on that because profiles are so super fun. People want something a little different sometimes. So get in there and give it a go. Now, the balance and profile will decide if a client is moved by your work, just like if you were an artist, because you are. If they're moved and you nail it, you're going to have a client for life. They're never going to forget what they had from you. They loved every moment of eating it. They're going to just be amazed by your talent. So those mouthfeel, right, into the balance and profile, those are really the most important, I think, things to innovate on and continue to work on to create just stellar recipes. This section with the balance and profile is where I feel most bakers can always have room for innovation and inspiration, including myself. I feel like we can always, because it's art, we can get in there and we can kind of mess around and try something new and have fun with it. And I want to throw one last one in here, number 9, because it's kind of the end of the show and we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to make it easier for our clients. So we're going to talk about the ease of consumption. The one thing that I feel that can make a client reluctant to eat products that they love, that all the boxes have been checked above, is if it's hard to eat it. Just because we're just creatures of habit and we don't like to really get super messy and we want something to be easy, right? So even if they love it, if it's really hard or messy, they might be reluctant to purchase more. So if the way you're serving it gets on them, on their hands, like if they have to pick it up and eat it and it gets on their face or on their hands, if they have flimsy boxes or cups or whatever it's in and it dumps or it, splits open, that might be an issue that we need to look at. And then they might just be less interested because of it. So just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about the very end of their experience with your product. This might mean that you just need to change your packaging or the way you serve it. Maybe you just need to throw in a plate or a fork or a napkin as part of the experience. Like ribs, you get the wipe. Like that's part of ribs. Everybody knows you're going to get messy eating ribs and they do it anyway because it's part of it. That's okay as long as you give them the wipe, right? Like help them towards the end. A quick example would be something like a cake truffle versus a cake pop. If you were going to go pick up a truffle, you'd probably get chocolate on your fingers, right? If you somehow decided to pick it up out of the paper. Or you can eat a cake pop, which is basically the same thing on a stick, right? So they kind of like fixed that problem with the stick. So just a way to kind of think about how can you, innovate to make something more easily edible. Okay. Woo. All right. That was a lot. I love this. So if you have any questions, let me know. If you want to talk more about this, if I missed something you feel like is important, definitely post it or post it in the group so we can discuss. That is a deep dive look into the anatomy of a product, hitting lots of aspects that you can break apart and look at individually to see where you feel like something could be innovated on. I personally consider each of these with every single product that I make. I kind of go through this in my brain as I'm putting things together. And I think if you sit down and you do this with your own products, you will definitely find some room for inspiration. Okay, and then again, if you want to use similar specific questions about these elements, when you are doing your product testing, your taste testers, if you're giving them a questionnaire, put those questions in. How do you feel about the mouthfeel? How do you feel about the flavor profile? How do you feel about the amount of icing? Whatever it is that you want information on, ask them covering these aspects, and you'll get a lot of good information if they are good market research participants. They should be giving you a lot of information, not just it's good or it's okay. Try to get them to like really lay out for you how they're feeling. And cheers to product innovation. It's so super fun. So hopefully you'll get in there and try something like this soon. I'm off to begin looking into which bucket list bake that I'm going to do for our Elite Mentorship Program Challenge. It's coming up in a few days. I'm going to host this one. And it's kind of one of those, like, what have I been dying to make that I just haven't done? And we're going to do it kind of as a group and everyone pick a bucket list bake. And I'm glad I have an excuse to get in the kitchen and try something new because I bake lots of the same things for markets and orders and all that. So I'm going to try something I've never tried before. I don't know what it's going to be yet. So if you have an idea of what you think I should make, you should post it in the video or like DM me or something because I'm always taking recommendations. Okay. All right. I am going to hop off for the day. Thanks so much for hanging out. I love this topic and I hope you all just have the best day and I will hopefully see you next week. Bye.